Scott, I'd love it if you could get us started. Let's get rolling.
Here we go. Welcome everyone to the Openpath and CBRE co-hosted webinar on the overarching theme of surviving versus thriving. My name's Scott Stuber with CBRE. This is the first of a weekly series. For today's discussion, we're going to focus on covering pivoting your company to a remote workforce. And before we get to the stars of the show, in James Siegel of Openpath and Casey Garcia of CBRE, I thought it would be helpful to just provide a brief context on the creation of this event and the background for this event. Myself, my business partner, Jake Bobeck, Casey Garcia, all with CBRE, along with James Siegel at the end of last week, and with the rest of his Openpath team, felt the urge to help. And the way that we felt we could help is by sharing our expertise in this current situation and to provide that expertise to you, the acknowledged leaders in our industries, the leaders of companies, the leaders of your teams. And if we could provide the expertise that we have to enable you to share those tools with your company, we thought you could perhaps be in a better position to keep your employees healthy and safe, first and foremost, which is what we're hearing as the top priority. Second, establish business continuity so you can continue to provide your services to your customers and to your clients and to your employees. And third is to come out of this situation stronger. Let's emerge stronger by perhaps becoming aware of tools that you weren't aware of before that now you can implement to lead to better employee productivity and better employee engagement. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake to introduce our speakers.
Great. Hey, thanks, Scott. And I'm just going to set up here quick introductions for Casey and James and then let them get rolling on this. But, you know, I did just want to wish everyone well, and I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy out there. And thanks for joining. So first, I'll introduce Casey Garcia, who is one of the heads of CBRE's global workplace group. Casey's really, I think, probably one of the smartest and most thoughtful people we have really at the entire company. And she's dealing with really the front lines of the COVID-19 that everyone's experiencing. Casey's background is in design and business consulting, and her role is really to identify key challenges of clients' existing workplace and to develop cohesive current and future strategies for single office locations and global real estate portfolios. She runs a team of 40 people across the US, and again, is just a very thoughtful leader in how companies are setting up their workplace. So we're happy to have Casey on. James, I've known James for about 15 years. He originally introduced me to my dentist, James, so thank you for the introduction to Dr. Shojanya about 15 years ago. But James is a serial entrepreneur. He's built and exited technology companies over the last 20 years. His most recent venture, James is also 2014 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award recipient, which I know he's very proud of for his last company. But this new venture, Openpath, is really a look into the future of technology around office space. And he's going to really get into this the second half of the webinar, but it's just a very cool company with very cool on the webinar. And with that, Casey, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, we garbled you a little bit at the end there, but thanks for the introductions, Jake. So I'm going to introduce the webinar format and help you understand kind of the different categories of information that you're going to receive here. We're basically going to have three parts. In the first part, you're going to hear tips for virtual collaboration from me, yours truly. Next, we're going to hear some tips for remote security from James, being the expert in that category. And with our remaining time, hopefully a good chunk of time, James and I will be answering questions that are submitted by the audience. Now, the way we're going to do the Q&A session actually is going to be a little bit unique. Since we have such a large number of participants on this call, we've actually placed all participant microphones on mute. And this is to help us control for background noise. Please do stay on mute even during the Q&A. Instead of shouting out, we're inviting you to visit menti.com in order to submit your questions. And the URL and code for joining will always be listed at the bottom of our presentation slides for easy reference. Now, the way that you use this is you can access Menti from your laptop or your mobile phone. You can submit questions at any time throughout the presentation, and feel free to submit as many questions as come to mind. Remember that all questions are anonymous, and while we're going to be answering as many questions as we can during the Q&A, we realize that we're probably going to run out of time, but don't let that discourage you from submitting lots and lots of questions. We want to know what's on your mind so that we can tailor future webinar and resource content towards topics that will be most useful to you. Now, as a final disclaimer, I just want to mention that in order for this to be a useful and actionable seminar for everyone, we wanted to be really specific wherever possible about tech tips and features to inspire immediate solutions. But I have to mention, for liability purposes, that companies and technologies mentioned in this webinar will be shared as examples only, and of course, don't represent the full suite of products that may exist in these categories. Now, without further ado, on to my tips for virtual collaboration. And as Jake introduced, my team is the CBRE Workplace team. We're about 40 strong across the US. And we work primarily remotely, or at least that's how we interact with each other. And over the past 10 years, what that's allowed us to do is really practice what we preach, because we not only advise clients every day on optimizing their work environments and processes, but we treat ourselves as our own guinea pigs. So our experience in working virtually with each other will allow me to be candid and detailed about what works and what doesn't when working remotely. And trust me, we've made all the mistakes already, so you hopefully won't have to. Now, my first few tips for virtual collaboration, these will be directed towards leadership. When collaborating virtually, leaders should always clarify team roles and objectives, because bystander effect is very, very real. Establish who is working on what, when it's due, and why. And if you're using an instant messaging platform like Microsoft Teams or Slack, that's what's pictured in the screenshot before you, you can use the @mention feature to notify a person or group that a task needs doing. Type the @ before a name, and that person will receive an alert of your post. Microsoft Teams also has a handy task feature that functions like a shared to-do list, where you can specify owners, due dates, level of urgency, and status. Now, I'll mention Asana is another tool that's helpful for project and task management. That's ASANA. And there are dozens of useful templates on Asana to leverage, like one-on-one meeting agendas, RFP processes, and work requests. I also recommend generally hosting internal kickoff calls for new projects or initiatives, and a regular cadence of virtual check-ins to ensure that progress is being made and to allow you to revisit roles. Suggested content for these check-ins includes a review of tasks completed last week, what's priority for this week, and what we're going to tackle next week. And when I check in with my team, I also like to add a human element, such as talking about the high points and low points of the past week. This helps me diagnose morale issues or other areas that I may need to address. Sometimes just a simple question of, is anything blocking your progress, will also do the trick. Next, leaders will need to set expectations around response times and follow through with timely feedback. Let team members know the best way to reach you and how quickly they can expect replies. Do you check email more frequently? Is phone better for urgent matters? And is it okay to reach out before 9 a.m. or after 5 p.m.? Status updates on instant messaging services can communicate availability in real time. You can select from the standard options of available or busy, or enter a custom message. Now, I personally find myself writing statuses like driving, call my cell, or out to lunch, back online at 1 p.m., or even leave me alone, I need 15 minutes to recharge. Now, when your team members can't walk by to your desk to see if you're free, it's also critical to practice transparency with your calendar. I recommend sharing your calendar with at least limited details. It's the difference between your team members seeing that your time is just booked versus being able to help you rearrange your schedule. Now, for example, just last week, I needed to schedule a client call, including one of my colleagues, but she had a conflict. So I checked her calendar and saw that the conflict was a call that I knew was less mission critical. And this helps me make a judgment on which meeting would be easier to reschedule and should be prioritized. Now, if you're worried about exposing confidential information, don't forget about the private meeting feature, where you can block the details for a specific event on your calendar rather than the details for the entire calendar. Now, just as important, protect your focus time and resist the urge to multitask during meetings, especially this one. Pay attention. You can snooze notifications or just close applications until you're ready to reply. Next, these next couple of tips are centered around maintaining engagement from afar. The first thing you need to do is encourage more frequent communication, not only between managers and direct reports, but also among peers and colleagues and across functional teams and roles. When working virtually, communication needs to be intentional, since you won't have the benefit of casual run-ins by the coffee machine or in the hallways. And use video whenever possible. This is written in bold and all caps and in a larger font, because I cannot emphasize enough what a difference it makes to see facial expressions and read body language to feel connected to your team. Now, a slightly more extracurricular recommendation is to make use of bots to help you keep people connected. One that my team uses is called the Donut Bot for Slack. Once installed, this bot selects 2 people, makes a virtual introduction, and prompts them to get to know each other. The genius of this bot is that it uses a special algorithm to find 2 people that don't interact much already. And this is especially useful, I find, for teams that maybe suffer from unintended silos or hierarchies, and can help bring people together when they're physically far apart. Now, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, so they say. And given the stresses of the current health crisis, it's more important than ever to find ways to stay sane when working from home. Now, teams can do this by creating moments for fun and culture. Digital spaces to celebrate team wins, share fun moments in each other's personal lives, and have casual conversations about what's going on in the world can help relieve the pressure of our circumstances. I'll use my own team as an example again, and we've created the following 4 Slack channels as virtual expressions of our culture. The first is our inspiration channel. We use this to post inspiring articles, quotes, or even songs. Now, this example is from one of our designers who posted a St. Patrick's themed mood board to help motivate our team and inspire creativity. Next, our cool work channel. This is where we post completed project files. And it's useful not only to celebrate a job well done, but also to pass best practices between regions. This screenshot was from earlier this year when a couple of my colleagues hosted a knowledge exchange with our Singapore office and then shared the output to our cool work channel. Our Yay channel, this is another celebration channel, but it isn't limited to project work. We post here when we want to congratulate a colleague for a promotion, an award, a certification, or anything else impressive and worth mentioning. It's a fantastic exercise for demonstrating gratitude for one another. And for me, the most energizing aspect of posting publicly like this is watching the emojis roll in on each post. Now, you may not be able to see it because this screenshot is a little bit small, but usually each celebration is accompanied by an outpouring of virtual high fives, champagne toasts, and party parrots. And lastly, my favorite is the Fun Stuff channel. It's our catch-all venue for posting pictures of family and pets, announcing engagements and birthdays, and just generally staying connected with what's going on in each other's lives. Now, this post is from one of my colleagues in San Francisco who's finding the silver lining of her quarantine by setting up her work from home office on her patio. Now, finally, remote working will be business as usual for some, a dream come true for others, and a nightmare come true for the rest. So to maintain productivity among an employee base with diverse levels of experience and competence, training is critical. Now, this is difficult to provide, I understand, at the drop of a hat, as is required in this situation, but fortunately there are several pre-existing resources available to you. My team has curated some relevant courses that are available on LinkedIn Learning, and you'll all receive a copy of this presentation after this call so that you can follow the links below. That brings me to the end of my section, so I'm going to pass control over to James, who is going to take us through some remote security tips. Take it away, James.
Casey, that's great. Thank you so much. And actually, your presentation just triggered, I remembered it's the 3rd Thursday of the month, and we normally have happy hour for our whole company. So I think that we're going to do a virtual happy hour today at 5 o'clock where everybody just basically gets online and has their favorite drink. I think that might be a new standard for the world we live in today. Okay, from a security tips perspective, Openpath is in the access control business. We involve, about 1,000 different system integration partners around the country in deploying and installing our systems. We've been literally having to deal with the phone ringing off the hook from partners and customers wanting to understand how to best pivot in this very short amount of time to a remote workforce, yet make sure that their physical premises are secure. And they have a lot of access challenges associated with now having everyone remote. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that whether it's workforce, and the best practices for how to work remote, or whether it's, security, both, CBRE and Casey and me with Openpath are available to all of you at any point in time with questions. There'll be contact information at the end. Some of the best practices and tips that, we're basically going to put into place have to deal with the questions that we're being presented with. So here's some of the questions that I've had over the last, week or two. How do you deal with letting people in, vendors and deliveries when there's nobody there? What about the schedule changes that are happening, and that, there's doors that are scheduled to unlock from 9 to 5 and now no one's there? You want to make sure that they're locked. How do you deal with shifting hours of people coming to work at different times? So in a social distancing world, we're obviously varying our shift and our workforce hours for those who have to critically be in the office still, or in a manufacturing facility or in a distribution facility. And so all of the door schedules and access privileges are changing. How do we manage with that? I think you've also got people sort of saying, hey, look, I'm going to take my chair home, or my monitor home, or my computer home. And we want to make sure they can have access to our facilities to get that. And you also want to do a little bit of monitoring to make sure that people are taking the right stuff home and not the wrong stuff home. Also, frankly, what's going on with everybody sharing the code to get into the building, into the door, and how do I manage that? Replacement cards, badges, and keys for employees who are all sort of swapping around. So as we sort of go through this, I wanted to sort of offer some suggestions here that we've seen as best practices, both from our system integration partners in the field who've been sharing this with us, and from our own knowledge. Let's start with what you do if you have sort of a traditional access control system in a traditional building that's either using key cards, codes, or is using keys. We suggest basically a lockbox. It's a quick and easy way. Install it locally. There's a key code to get in, and you can put keys and access credentials in that. It's a temporary fix, but it's one that can help you with the variability of everything going on right now. One thing to sort of keep in mind, however, is that if you're going to have a key card in that lockbox, same as keys, they can be copied and cloned pretty easily. You can take them to a hardware store or a market and copy them, both cards digitally as well as keys. So you want to try to at least change out your access card and put a new one in every week that has a different ID and credentials, so that if any of the ones that you had were cloned, you can at least make sure that you have some changeover there and you can discontinue a legacy card. I also think that scheduling sort of office hours for your location where deliveries are going to be made, people can come by and pick things up, and having a guard or having someone there to physically sort of give people limited access might be a way to go, especially if you want people to leave with certain things and you want to sort of check to make sure that they're leaving with the right things. And then finally, if you have an on-premise access control system, a server that's sitting in an IT closet or in a security office that runs your access control, and you don't want to have to come in and make all those changes in place, you can actually set up a remote access virtual private network. This is a way for your computer at home to log into your network at the office so that you can remote in and get access to that. Especially if it's a browser-based software system, you can do that. And you can reach out to us and we can provide you with links to remote VPN services that you can set up if you have questions about that afterwards. I think one of the things that we've seen on a sort of a list of best practices for both our clients and customers, as well as folks who have cloud-based and mobile technologies, is the ability to really log in from anywhere and manage the system. So this is one of those moments in time where you kind of say, look, I've got a system that allows me to manage my physical location remote. What do I need to worry about? What are the things I need to log in and check? And how do I make best use of the system? So one, log in and actually make sure that everything's coming out okay. Two, you can deploy mobile credentialing. This gives you the ability to not have to actually physically issue a key card to every single person, revoke that key card, or track whether those cards have been lost. You can issue a mobile credential, which means people can just go to the App Store, they can download on their phone a way to actually unlock the door, and this allows you to change their access privileges remotely, and then they can just use their phone. Another good thing you can do is you can capabilities within our technology and within a lot of these mobile and cloud-based technologies, you can remotely unlock doors. So think about if someone shows up at the office and they need to get in, you can actually from your phone click a button and unlock the door for them. And therefore you can kind of walk them through the space as they're on the phone with you, make sure they get access to the things they want. This is great for deliveries. This is great for anybody who needs just a moment to get in. I think changing door schedules is another important thing that we're all going to have to deal with. Clearly, if you have doors in the sort of lobby or in sort of common areas that are scheduled to be open from 9 to 5, you need to go in and you need to change that schedule on the access control system to override what might be there on a day-to-day basis. If you have a remote system like Openpath, you can just log in remotely and do that schedule change. And you want to be vigilant about this. You need to go in and make sure that you've updated the schedules on all the doors. There is a handy feature in your mobile app for those of you who have the system called Are You the Last to Leave? So that if you're the last to leave, you just click that button and it automatically locks the door. It makes it really easy to not have to worry about whether the door is on or off a specific schedule. There's also a concept that you can use called a virtual pass or a temporary pass. In day-to-day business life, we use this for visitors and guests, but now it's even more important to be able to issue this to people who are just coming to your space, to your location, and need a 5-minute pass to open the door, get in to the garage, to the elevator, to the parking lot, to wherever they need to go. And so you can issue these from your phone. Administrators of the system just need to enable users to have the cloud key permission, and then people can offer temporary one-time passes to any visitor who shows up. I think alerting is also important. We need to know what's going on at our physical location. And so most access control systems have an alerting capability. This means you can set a rule. Hey, if a door is ajar for 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 2 minutes, I want to get an alert so I know about it since no one's there to sort of check. If there's a forced entry, if you don't have an alarm system, you can use your access control system to do this. Openpath and most access control systems have these capabilities, and you can remote in and change all of these and trigger them from the console. I'd also say that we have a number of schools and a number of large campuses that are needing people to kind of come in en masse, and they need to override every door's schedule instantly. So there's lock open and lock down features available both through Openpath and through traditional systems that allow you to instantly open and keep open all the doors in a location or a campus for a specific period of time and then lock them all down. It's a little bit more flexible, obviously, with our system because you can do it from your mobile phone or from a computer console, but you don't have to actually go into the office to do that. And finally, what I'd say is that video surveillance is more important than ever. It ties into access control, and it gives you the ability to remotely see exactly what's going on at your location from your phone, from your computer, from your iPad, wherever you are. And that kind of consistency to know, okay, here's who's there. I now see the access credential that somebody has, and I actually visually see who it is, allows you to have surety that the right people are coming in and out of your location, even though you're not there. Finally, what I would say is that there's a lot more germ-free strategies that become important and relevant in today's germ-sensitive world. Obviously, seamless access where you don't have to actually, touch or use a key or a key card to open a door, where they automatically open, either with, an auto operation feature or a mobile or hands-free feature, are technologies that we and other folks offer. We'll talk a little bit more about this next week as we talk about the post-COVID world and what we need to do to prepare. But just keep in mind that these are the right moments in time to think about those strategies for what the world's going to look like in a few weeks and in a few months. Casey, back to you.
Thanks very much, James. I'll go ahead and take away your control just so we don't conflict with each other. But we're moving into the Q&A section. Thank you, everybody who has already submitted a question using Menti. Before we dive into that, though, just in case we lose some people at 11:30 who have to jump, I wanted to make sure that there was an awareness that there are several resources available to you, not only provided by CBRE and Openpath, but also, of course, wanting to publicize those that are made public by the WHO, the CDC, and OSHA. And in addition, just re-mention that there will be a weekly webinar on several different topics hosted by CBRE and Openpath that will feature different panelists with different levels of expertise. And following this webinar, we'll be submitting a webinar recording so that anybody who couldn't hear something or wants to review the content can listen to it, and also a poll that will ask for topic submissions for future conversations and webinars that would be useful to you. So without further ado, I'll go back to the Q&A slide and let Scott help us moderate the most interesting questions that we received.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, James. Really, really helpful. I think one thing too to establish for our audience is I think you have to understand that we're trying to cater to a large audience here. So we're aware that a lot of you might be at a different point in your integration of technology and perhaps tools to your workforce. So in the event that we weren't able to touch on either in the frame of the Q&A question session or in the content that was presented, if we don't touch on what is actually really truly pressing to you right now, and we don't get to your question because we got a lot of them, please either reach out to us individually or perhaps submit the content that you'd like to hear more about, and then we can cater to that content as we're building out the curriculum for our to be delivered webinars in the future. So first off, Casey, and James for that matter, but I think this might be more for Casey, keeping in mind that our audience is at different perhaps kind of phases of their integration of remote workforce systems, what would you say is the single biggest tip or insight about working and managing remotely? What's the single biggest?
I think the single biggest is to establish and keep a routine as a team. What I think is the biggest risk of suddenly going all remote for teams that are not used to doing so is that suddenly everybody's life schedules may take hold and cause the team to really quickly go off the rails or get out of sync. So it's really important, and it sounds really silly to say, but to emphasize regular business hours, to emphasize that regular team meetings will still happen, even if they happen to happen virtually. Even things like the team happy hour, just kind of maintaining those milestones that have some level of regularity will keep people feeling like they have to continue being productive and we're still open for business rather than it becoming kind of an extended vacation for everyone.
Yeah, one thing to add is that we've seen putting deadlines on projects has been incredibly helpful at making sure that we've been effective over this last week of working remote. We've had a number of different big projects that we've set tight deadlines on, and it's really focused folks so that even if your hours need to be flexible as you take care of life, because life is happening to all of us real time, you know what needs to get done and by when it needs to get done. And so I think tight and strict deadlines on projects are more important than ever in this remote work environment.
Great. A little bit of a lighthearted question. What kind of video call creativity or faux pas have each of you seen in the last couple of weeks, either internally or from your clients over the course of this experience of shifting to mobile?
I'll start. I've got a really funny story that I've always shared. It didn't necessarily happen in the last couple of weeks for this coronavirus, but just over the course of my years. We were once hosting kind of an all-hands call for several of our teams across different departments and geographies. So this was a large call, probably 100+ people. And we had kind of the Brady Bunch of videos, but the one that was right in the middle that everybody was kind of focused on at the exact wrong moment was someone who had taken the trouble to dress very professionally for his upper half, wore a nice blazer and a tie to be presentable in his video. But for whatever reason, during the course of the call, he had to stand up to go do something. And everybody on the call discovered that his professionalism really only extended about waist high, and he was not wearing any pants. So everybody got to see what his choice of undergarments looked like that day, and it was a very distracting moment for everyone. It was very difficult to kind of understand how to kind of address that professionally. We all just decided to kind of generously ignore it and not embarrass him on the call. But it's kind of those moments that really emphasize the level of detail you have to kind of think through when you are attempting to adapt to being on video and not being in an office. And do I wake up and shower or just roll over and get to work? And again, kind of goes back to my recommendation that it's probably better to try and keep a routine, not only to kind of keep your productivity on track, but to continue to be a functioning human adult in society.
So maybe two funny stories. One, I don't think we should dare Scott to stand up right now, but let's just hope. I'll tell you this. One is backgrounds. So in Zoom, you can actually change your background. You can see I put the beach background in. Believe it or not, I'm not actually at the beach. I know, hard to believe. And so just have a little bit of fun with the backgrounds. We've seen people put some really cool, funky stuff up there. As appropriate as possible, please. And then the second thing is one of our customers is basically having Halloween once a week where everybody dresses up in a costume for the stand-up call in the morning, which I think is great because people are actually putting some real thought into some creative outfits that you might not necessarily want to wear to work, but are definitely appropriate for sitting in your garage or wherever it is that your home office is. So I think you can still have fun with this stuff.
Great, thank you guys. Back to a technical question. James, what video systems does Openpath integrate with?
So we have a handful of different folks that we integrate with natively or out of the box. Milestone is an on-premise video system. Rhombus is another one. And we've also got Cameo, C-A-M-I-O. If you want, you can see all of this at openpath.com. And then if you pull down on the solutions tab, there'll be VMS or video integrations, and you can see a list of those partners. We actually have a number of additional video management system integrations that are rolling out shortly as well with systems like Meraki and Avigilon and a host of others. So I think if you're looking for a cloud-based system for video, there's a bunch of really great stuff out there. And if you have already a system in your physical location that's an on-premise system, there's a high likelihood that we'll be able to integrate with that as well.
Great. I guess this is kind of a specific question for each of you, but how has CBRE and how has Openpath, how has your work evolved in this response to COVID-19?
Okay, if you want, I'll start. We have teams all over the US of people, much like CBRE, we're a lot smaller. And we already were doing a decent amount of virtual work where we were having to communicate quite a lot. I think one of the opportunities and challenges in what we do is that life safety access to physical premises, what we provide in terms of locking the doors and managing that system in the cloud, is on the critical list of things that need to be serviced and supported. You can imagine if people are locked out or locked in, that's not a good thing. And so we've had to maintain a level of 24/7 technology support, both ourselves for our customers, but also through all of our system integration partners who are the ones who install, deploy, and manage these systems. We've seen that they are being called on more often to come in now and start to audit buildings and audit systems to understand, hey, are we ready for the new reality of what's sort of going on today? And that's one of the things that we're racing to sort of help them with. So helping make sure that all of these folks can really walk on site and know, okay, here's the germ-free stuff that you need to enable. Here's the automation that you need to put in place. There's more urgency about that now because a lot of people are not at their work and they're taking this as an opportunity to quickly upgrade their systems at their premises while no one's there. And that is putting a lot of strain on us in a good way, I guess, but also on all of our partners out there who are trying to get out there and service them. So there's a lot of work to be done over this period.
So CBRE's response, has followed a lot of what Openpath has done as well, but it's interesting how it's evolved over the weeks as more information became available. I'll say several weeks ago, when it wasn't yet clear how serious the situation was going to be, we started with just limiting non-essential travel. So saying, okay, let's take a critical look at not only who needs to be flying or driving where, but also who needs to be at those meetings. So saying, do we need to really bring a team of 4, or can we reduce it down to one person being there in person and the rest joining remotely? Then, of course, as news rolled in and responses needed to be more severe, we enacted kind of an interim measure where we said, okay, we're going to reduce the density on our on-site premises by implementing different teams of people. So we assigned people to a green team or a gold team. And we said, green team, you're going to be in the office this week. Gold team, you'll be in the office the next, and so on and so forth. But honestly, even before that procedure was rolled out in totality, the situation again took a turn, and we had to immediately enact a work from home policy for all non-essential personnel across the US and Canada. So it was really over the course of a weekend that we went from kind of half staff to no staff or very few staff, and really limited the number of people who had to be on site at the office to maybe 1 or 2 people who were there to receive packages or answer the mainline phones and things of that nature. Fortunately, as the CBRE and as part of our DNA, as we've been rolling out kind of our new process, we've invested pretty heavily in technology. I think that was kind of the single thing that's kept us afloat and sort of managing through this sudden shift. All of our files were already available on cloud services. We use Box. And everybody had a laptop that needed one and other various accoutrements in order to be able to work from home. So most of our employees weren't stuck in the Best Buy line trying to, get the tools that they needed to stay productive at home.
Great.
Taking a look at some of these questions. What else can we answer, Scott? Are you on mute?
Hey, Scott can't come in, but there was a good one, Casey, that was, do you and James see this mobile working being the norm post COVID-19?
It's interesting. I've certainly seen a lot of articles already being written about that. I'd say it's probably too early to tell, given that this experiment could have a variety of different outcomes for different organizations, depending on their level of preparedness. For some, this will demonstrate that they could have been doing this all along. For others, it will really underscore the importance of the physical workplace and what can and cannot be remote, but it's forcing us to really experiment with that in real time. I'd say, conservatively speaking, it's unlikely that this will go on forever just because people decide that they like it, but it certainly will challenge, I think, how people do conduct work virtually, because I've always said this, during an epidemic or not, that virtual work is really here to stay. Most of our organizations operate globally. We need to be connecting with colleagues and clients that we're separated from, a lot of distance. And so the lessons learned, I think, from this will be really valuable just for maintaining that kind of status of business going forward.
One thing I'll add is obviously we're all in the real estate world. That's really where we spend a lot of our time. And so if you think about the perspective of a tenant and the perspective of a landlord, they're very different in terms of how we have to think about this, right? So a landlord physically has to manage the property. There's on-premise property management, facilities people. You need to be there in order to do that. And I don't think that necessarily changes. You can't really work remote there. And you have to think about, okay, now how do I reallocate the space that I have with my tenants with these kind of needs in mind that they want to be able to flex a lot more. So we've had flex workspace be such a big part of the conversation over the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's more important than ever now that people can flex with their workspace and really be able to work in different places in different ways. Just because, one, they're going to want to maybe distance themselves a little bit from one another. 2, they might not want to commute as far in order to get to work, and they need to be able to go to different locations to do it. And 3, the hours that they work within, I think, are going to change dramatically. I think the flip side is that the pendulum swims the other way for the tenant perspective, which is that tenants today are locked into the infrastructure that they have. Most people are in long-term leases. They have capital built out and invested in their physical space, and they have a way of doing business. So I think most tenants are sort of thinking from the perspective of, hey, I have to make use of what I have. I just need to be smart about how I use it. And so I think that technology is going to bring a lot to bear in that category, improving the quality of how people are utilizing their space. And that obviously is a place where we play a lot. But I also think that folks who maybe have been a little unwilling to invest in that kind of technology in the past are now kind of forced to invest in it. You need to be able to let your people manage the physical location from other locations than just where they sit. And you need to be able to, make the system more intuitive. So, everything in the cloud, from video surveillance to alarm systems to access control to visitor management, is going to be more important than ever. And these on-prem systems that have been around for so long, I think, are going to go away.
Thanks, James. And just keep in mind, everyone, that this is a preview for next week, really, which is when we're going to focus on kind of what to do moving forward post-COVID. Couple more questions here. One, Casey, we had a question from someone that said, are there consultants available to implement the ideas you suggested? I need help.
Yes, absolutely. My team's day job is consulting on exactly these matters, whether it's emergency circumstance or not. So our email addresses are included in this presentation in the back of this. Please feel free to reach out, even if you just need a phone a friend. These are, unprecedented times, and we want to be as helpful as possible. So yeah.
Maybe switch to that slide so email addresses on the screen. There we go.
Yeah, let's get that on there. And James and Casey, a combined question here. What are some suggested games or activities that I can use to engage my employees via chat only to maintain morale? I want to keep my office's culture and interaction alive.
Chat only. That's a difficult one.
So
maybe some kind of, go ahead, James.
Yeah. So fortunately or unfortunately, I have 4 kids at home now that are distance learning. And so they're in basically online classes with all of their school. And so I've been able to sort of get some best practices from the schooling and bring that into the work environment. So one thing that I've seen that is kind of cool is kind of word of the day, which is like, okay, what's the word of the day or the phrase of the day? And people can kind of suggest different themes and sort of talk about that. I kind of like that. And then another thing that we've seen from school that works well at our company is a kudos Slack channel where people can compliment one another and jobs well done via Slack. And so that's been a huge success for our company because, somebody just does something nice or just does something cool or puts a project out or does a little something. Everybody can sort of see what they're doing. And that way we can sort of both be proud of one another and also give props to people.
Whenever I'm asked creativity questions like this, my instinct is also always to kind of spread the love around. You'd be surprised, I think, how creative your team can get if you give them the opportunity and the venue to do so. So something that my team does pretty regularly that I think is successful is kind of rotate responsibility for coming up with these kinds of ideas. So maybe you say it's every Friday or even every day. If you're feeling particularly stir crazy, you can select another person on your team and say, hey, the ball is in your court today to design some really fun activity for our team. And that way you'll get a lot of variety, you'll give people a lot of ownership, and you'll give kind of a venue for the different personalities on your team to really take shape. And it'll organically feel a lot like your culture because it's driven by the people, which is kind of the heart of culture anyway.
Our finance team combined with our portal development team decided to put something out on Slack channel yesterday, which I just noticed now, called WOD, Workout of the Day. And they're posting their daily workouts now, which is great because, my finance team is really in shape. They're really buff and they do a lot of push-ups, which is good. And the portal team really needs to catch up, I think. So that's a challenge to any of them who are listening. Let's get the push-ups done.
Oh man, if that channel was on my team, I would be suspiciously silent. People would have an uncomfortable window into my non-workout life.
Okay, last question here, guys. As I'm being kind of asked to work from home now, and I've got my kids running around, and I got my wife working from home.
Oh.
So I find my own space to get work done when I'm in a crowded workplace with my family.
Casey, you want to start or should I?
James, you have kids. You have a more chaotic world going on. Maybe authentic coming from you to start.
Okay. My friends who all have the same opportunity sent me a note. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And they said, homeschooling is going well at my house. 2 students have been suspended for fighting, and 1 teacher is about to be fired for drinking on the job. And so I'm like, oh, that sounds about right. That's my house as well. Look, you know what? I really think that if you're in a small space and you can carve out your own little corner and have it, it's important. Last night from 8:30 to 10:30, our group of guy friends got together and played liar's dice on Zoom, and it was great. And there was a lot of drinking involved. And then my wife took care of everything. And then tonight she's got a ladies drinking book club kind of thing going on from 8:30 to 10. There's a lot of drinking involved in all of these options. But I think at the end of the day, it's just about making sure that, you know, you're all leaning in and you treat this as an opportunity to see your kids and spend time with them. My mom and my dad, grandpa and grandma, have started online learning over Zoom with my kids. So they have a 30-minute session every day, because obviously my kids are not allowed to see their grandparents right now, where my grandparents are teaching, or my parents are teaching my kids something. And basically it's a hack that they're trying to do. So they have a little 30-minute thing where they teach them one thing. And it's kind of cool because it offloads stuff from my wife and I during that hour period.
That was a perfect answer, James. The only thing that I'll add from the perspective of someone who doesn't have kids is that I've gotten a couple of questions from my clients around saying that they're worried that having kids and chaos going on in the background of their work from home right now is going to somehow have some effect on their credibility or professionalism at work. So I guess my message to everyone is that, you know, let's all just practice some empathy here. These are some unusual circumstances. You got to be forgiving if there's a kid who busts in wanting to ask a question like, what's the tallest man you've ever met? Or a dog barking, or something goes wrong, just because so much right now is outside of our control. So be human, be forgiving, and, you know, we'll all make it out on the other side okay.
Yeah. Scott, you're still muted.
We've covered a majority of the questions, and we're, I think, ready to part here. We will be sending some follow-up to allow us to have the appropriate content that's relevant for you on our next session. And Jake, I'm going to leave it to you to close.
Great. Yeah, we just want to thank everybody. Let everyone know that this is going to be a ongoing every Thursday webinar that we're going to be updating with different folks and content and guests. We'll also be following up with best practices, market commentary, and other important information to keep everybody updated on the situation. So we thank you for joining. We hope you find value in this, and you know, our team here is going to continue to send out what we think is valuable information to folks as the situation unfolds. So thank you very much, and hope everyone's safe and healthy out there.
Thanks, everybody.